Welcome back to Dirty 20. Today, we're talking published adventures. Wizards of the Coast, who publishes D&D 5th edition, brings out roughly about one published adventure a year. What that means is that since 2014 maybe, you've got actually a little bit more than one a year, because in the early stages they brought out several in a row. But they are, generally speaking, a great way if you have no idea of what exactly you want to play, or you're not too sure about how much time you have to commit to creating a campaign. They're a fantastic way to get your players, if nothing else, started on a journey with an overarching idea to the campaign. But I think it's really important to remember a couple of things. First of all, it's not actually that much of a time saver, because when you get one of these published adventures, you have to read through it. And you have to read through it, I would say, twice. Mostly because you don't want to improvise something early on that later on has a big influence or is a spoiler in some way for the campaign. We're going to talk about the different books that have come out, but I'm thinking off the top of my head Curse of STRAHD, which is a fantastic gothic noir, slightly tinged with horror elements to it. But there's a lot of things that have to happen in a certain order, so to speak. And if you mess it up a little bit, it can throw a lot of things off. So that's definitely one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is that, like so many things in D&D, a lot of it's up to you. You have to be flexible with these adventures. What I mean is you have to be willing to, again, read through it and potentially omit certain things and add certain things. So flexibility is huge. Thus far, Wizards of the Coast has released a number of pre-made adventures, and I have the list here. So you have, as I mentioned before, Curse of STRAHD, which is a cool gothic noir. It has a lot of elements of Dracula in it, and it's probably one of my favorites, and we'll do a bit of a ranking at the end. Ghosts of SALTMARSH, which came out, I believe, in 2019, which is a fantastic book. It's actually a slightly backdoored Greyhawk setting. We've talked about settings, and we're going to do some specific videos on specific settings later on. But Forgotten Realms is generally considered to be vanilla D&D, or the setting that most of the adventures are set in. But Ghost of Saltmarsh is a kind of Greyhawk backdoor. Curse of STRAHD is also this interesting rewrite of an old adventure, which then became a whole campaign setting, which is one of the reasons why it's a little bit confusing. But again, fabulous adventure. Tomb of Annihilation, which is famously one of the most deadly dungeons that was ever created in Dungeons and Dragons history. They kind of revamped it, made it a longer style campaign. You've got Out of the Abyss, which deals a lot with the Underdark and Demon Lords, some really quite cool high fantasy stuff. Storm King's Thunder, if you like giants and dragons and that kind of almost like traditional fantasy stuff, that is a really, really cool one. Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat. This was one adventure that was divided into two books. They've recently re-released it as one book, one adventure. Very much dragons and dragon cults Perhaps one of the more maligned adventures that was written quite early on in 5th edition, and not the most popular amongst a lot of people who have played it. Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is also kind of the first part of the Dragon Heist and Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is all set in Waterdeep. It's a cool city campaign combined with a dungeon delving campaign, and so nice modern elements with some traditional twists. Princes of the Apocalypse, one I haven't really read through. Again, probably one of the earlier ones, and so not one of the more popular ones. I feel like they've really refined the way they write them, and the possibility of using certain elements whilst leaving other elements out. And Descent into Avernus, which is the latest one thus far, is a good example of that, in that they have, for example, rules on using infernal engines, and so you get this almost semi-Mad Max style to it, which is really, really cool. Ghost of Saltmarsh is heavily influenced by seafaring, so there's a lot of rules for boats and boat-to-boat combat, things like that. So if you want a pirate campaign, I mean, that's the book for you. And then one of my personal favorites is called Tales of the Yawning Portal. It's very interesting because it takes a bunch of old-school, traditional D&D adventures or dungeons, and it puts them in a sort of compilation, which you can dip in and out of whenever you want. And I think that's really handy. If, for example, you were to get the starter kit or the essentials kit, for which we have a video for, as well as the Stranger Things starter set, check it out. If you start off in one of those settings, and then you're like, well, I want to do something different, or try something that's, you know, from some other kind of source, then Tales of the Yawning Portal, you can just grab one of the dungeons out of it and plop it into your setting, and boom, you know, you have some slightly different flavor to your campaign. Now let's talk a little bit about my top 3 of the published adventures, simply because I think that some are definitely better than others. I would definitely put Curse of Strahd very high up there in my top 3, possibly number 1 if I were to go in order. It has some really great gothic noir elements to it, and I think the thing that really puts it over the top is the bad guy, Strahd, who is this tragic vampire figure, and you know, I think, like in movies or a TV show, when you nail your bad guy, when you get them just right, I think it makes everything else work better. So as I said, it can be a little bit confusing getting the players started on Curse of Strahd. Can be a little bit tough because you're kind of shoehorning them into this demi-plane. Again, confusing. But if you read through it, if you prep well enough, I think you can have a fantastic adventure from, I would say, anything from level 1 to 10 and even 15 and higher, I would say. It's that, you know, full of stuff. My second choice would be Ghost of Saltmarsh, where you have, as I mentioned before, boat-to-boat combat and rules on traveling on the oceans. And I think that, you know, I'm such a sucker for pirate kind of adventures that as soon as they announced it, I was like, okay, I'm definitely getting that. The adventures that are in there are pretty cool. You can take that town, Saltmarsh, and put it in your campaign setting, and you'll have to tweak a few of the elements, like some of the organizations that are in the story. You might need to adapt them to whatever kind of situation you're players are in. But overall, really interesting, very adaptable to a pirate-style campaign, so definitely number 2. And finally, number 3, I would say, is probably the most recent adventure that was published, Descent into Avernus. This is about the city of Baldur's Gate. If you've ever played some of the computer games, this is the same setting. And it's all about it kind of getting pulled into hell and dragged into the Blood War, which is a war that's been going on for eternity between demons and devils, which is really interesting. And it brings you into the first layer of hell, Avernus, which is this kind of desolate, you know, I would say post-apocalyptic kind of feeling setting, which again brings in the nice Mad Max style vehicles and elements that you can kind of throw in there. So again, you're looking for something a little bit different. Great adventure to have a go at. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to get in touch, please head on over to La Victoria Productions on Facebook. You can also check us out on Instagram. I'm EnanoLVP. Jazzy J. Shiro is our producer. He's also on Twitter at MouthLaVictoria. We're also on LinkedIn. And if you get the time, please head on over to our website, www.lavictoriaproductions.com, where you can catch up on old episodes, check out our blog. Our producer just wrote a really cool one on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 2. He's going deep dive into the whole MCU. It's really cool. Check it out. Thanks again, and keep slaying. Come on, help me out. Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and website.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, you always look like you're gonna get in trouble in school when you do this bit.
Did you like how I put it in the bloopers?
I was laughing with Becky. I was like, he always just looks like he's gonna get in trouble.
Okay, so